Hey everybody, Jason from @scoon.art here, and welcome to another Indie Comics Corner. I'm glad you guys really liked the last video that I did featuring Joey Fennell's artwork. Put a little link in the video here so you can go check that out if you haven't seen it. Today, I thought we'd take a little bit more of a look at process. I make comics myself, so I'll take you along and we can see how I go through writing an outline, turning that into a script as well as thumbnails, and get in preparation for working on the bigger paper. So yeah, if you want to come on over to the art table, we'll take a look at just that. All right, welcome to the drawing table here. So we got a number of things going on here. Let me kind of deconstruct and take you through it. Okay, so yeah, around last year, I drew this comic here, or drew this little cat here. China Cat Mows the Lawn. I always find that during the springtime, you know, I listen to Grateful Dead when mowing the lawn. It just matches the vibe. Let's pull out the mower. Uh-oh, China Cat, nothing but smoke. So this is like kind of the DNA here. That's pretty much it for that. A little drawing of Egon Schiele. So that anthropomorphic cat that one needs to mow his lawn. It's springtime. Listening to Grateful Dead again, you know, when I'm mowing the lawn. And, you know, it got me thinking about like the era that, like the Crumb comics, like Fritz the Cat. It got me thinking about Fritz the Cat. You know, you go from Grateful Dead, the 1960s counterculture, to Robert Crumb. It's a natural progression. So I got to looking at some old Fritz the Cats, and I really love, there's like a complex simplicity here. Like his layouts are all very simple, you know, 3x4. I think there's some 2x3 in here somewhere. You know, he's just playing with these basic ways to like break up the pages. And I figured, boy, I can kind of do that. It kind of gives you a little bit of room to just kind of fill in the blanks. It naturally paces your page, and then there's a simplicity to it that I really like. So I sat down one evening and I wrote myself a little outline here. I just got to typing, and I ended up with about 3 pages of an outline. Doing this, it was just, you know, important to not really edit myself, just to hit the computer or whatever. But I just went and just wrote down everything and got to a conclusion here. And then now I'm at the phase that's kind of like, it's kind of accomplishing like a few things. I'm reading through this again. So we're like at an editing phase, and obviously you can see I have things struck out. I'm like dividing things up. So I'm like trying to figure out pacing. And I'm trying to figure out what I can cut out. What's like fat, for example. We'll just go through the script on this. So, wakes up in bed, stands drearily at the doorway of his kitchen, gas stove. There's an old percolator. And I'm just drawing these things really quick in the sketchbook, doing it with pencil first, and then going back in with pen. And then basically this is a miniature version of what my larger page layout will look like. So it's like, you know, I'm just doing sketches of the comic book. And even this is subject to editorial change when I go to blow it up later. So everything is kind of in flux until you finally put that, you know, last bit of ink down. But anyway, you know, he sniffs the coffee, smells like fish. He pours it anyway, you know, looks out the window. He sees it's beautiful outside. You know, there's a bee buzzing, the sun's shining. There's a shed out there. There's a tree, you know, classic tree with a hole in it. But, you know, the grass and the weeds are just like so overgrown. He closes the blinds. This is where I'm already thinking of editorial changes. Right here, I drew him looking a little bit like sad, but I think I need to draw him like basically downing the last of his coffee because that would match the, you know what I'm saying? So that kind of takes you through like my thought process of like what I'm doing. And then in the outline here, you know, I have it divided here. It says what I wrote: China Cat awakes in his country house, his silver kimono contrasting against his colorful copper fur. He drags him, and this is where I have it crossed out. He drags himself into the kitchen and turns on the stove to heat up yesterday's coffee. And I'm thinking, I put a note here for myself. So again, like, it's not so much about like thinking about writing good prose. It's more about getting information out here for my future self, to, if I can't figure out how to word it. So, you know, he goes in to make yesterday's coffee. And then a note for myself visually was, think about the end of No Country for Old Men when Tommy Lee Jones's character goes and visits his brother in that house full of cats and like undone dishes and stuff. He walks over to the kitchen window, he peeks through the blinds, and he's met with jagged darkness from his overgrown yard blocking the morning sun. And then I have a little bit of this going into page 1 as well. Closing the blinds, he walks back over to the stove, turned the burner off, coffee now boiling. He pours himself a cup and takes a sip. He looks over at the wall at his feet. So you can see how I have taken a lot of this information and rearranged it to something a little bit more simple and concise. Because this is like, I treat my outlines as like word vomit, essentially, but that's kind of it. So now, now I'm actually in the middle of drawing. I scripted several pages of this outline the other day, as I want to do here. So, and I've already outlined pages 9, 10, 11. I've already done thumbnails for those. So if you want, we'll go ahead and skip ahead to those, and then we're going to do page 12 right now. So so a little context for this, we have Country Cat his lawnmower is broken, he's loaded in the back of his truck, and he's driving it to a like automotive repair place. On his drive, we get some like artful shots of like some of the sights he sees. One of those he sees, he comes across, he goes across a covered bridge, like an old-fashioned wooden covered bridge, going over a stream. And it's, I kind of have the layout like, I'll show you. I guess there's no harm in showing you. Like, this is what I got for the thumbnail here. So you got the classic kind of like double hump, kind of cartoon, what do you call it? Composition. And in the foreground, we have, some roadkill. Like there's a deer on the side of the road. And cartoon X's in his eyes. Oops, keep skipping ahead, one too many. So he comes across this roadkill. There's a dog wagging his tail, having a meal. One of the sights you see in the country sometimes. You get a shot of China Cat or Country Cat looking down kind of in disgust or distaste. Some onomatopoeia there, splort, crunch, munch. The dog looks up and he's all smiling. And I thought it would be important that if around the dog and kind of this gruesome scene, we had like flowers and like overgrowth, like more of that springtime stuff I've introduced in the, at the beginning of the drawing. I'm going to have that kind of be an ever-present, part of the setting or whatever, just overgrowth and newness and spring. But the dog's like, he's got the big dog smile, but he's like, got a bunch of gore coming down from his mouth. And then the last panel is Country Cat speeding away. There's like a dust cloud coming off the back of his tire, which is out of frame, but you see his bumper and the back of his mower, the little handle kind of going this way. Hard to see, I know, but these are quick drawings. I'll do some scans so we can appreciate the full size. I'll put them on the video here. And basically the dog just goes back to his business. Maybe I'll put some more onomatopoeia, some more crunch, munch, splorch type stuff. And then we have China Cat pulling into the automotive shop here, which I should erase some of this pencil here. It would make some of this a little clearer. And then we have China Cat opens the door to the shop. We get a little bell rigged up to a piece of wood above the door, so it makes a little ding sound when a customer comes in. And then we have a little word bubble here. It's going to say, "Come on back now." China Cat peeks around the corner, and there's a man you know, behind the counter with his back turned and he's like working on something. Which I'm not sure. Maybe I should. So this is where, you know, I did this the other day. So we're always like kind of editing here. So maybe the last page I worked on, I guess, isn't necessarily final. So we got 9, 10, 11. We went over those. I want 11 and 12 together. And then we can get to 13 and 14 a bit later. So what might happen here? I wonder if if 4 panels is kind of like, if that's not working. What if I were to combine these two? Because I could have these, this is a 6 plus 4, 10. So I would have room to eliminate one thing and kind of rewrite. So let's see, what's the action on here? So you open the door, he'll be with you in a minute. What can I, it'd be nicer to end it with what can I help you with? So let's brainstorm how I can do this here. All right, so China Cat takes a step out of the aisle where the man is working. So these 3 would go together here. And then we'll put, I like that. So I'll be with you in a minute, and then panel 1, page 12 here. So after we have, I'll be with you in a minute, China Cat takes a step from out of the aisle towards the counter where the man is working and the floor creaks. So that's what's going to go here in our middle section here. So we have, so this is, you draw, I like to draw them small here just to make sure, it's kind of like a checklist, you know? So I'll put ding for that one. Come on back for that one. Peek. Be with you in a minute. Let's see. China Cat takes a step out. We got creak. So this is like a callback to the peak. The peak and the creak kind of work together. Come on back. Be with you in a minute. And then they're all in response, you know, ding, come on back, he peaks, be with you in a minute, he creaks. And then number 3 on the middle is going to be, all right, the parts go flying. Parts go flying. So we even have like this middle row is kind of narrating a disruption in this like mechanics world here. Yeah. Panel 2, page 12 here. Yeah, but I don't know if we're going to be able to do 3 by 4. Can we do 3 by 3? What would that look like? Because it'd be a 11 by 6. Yeah, they'd be really long panels. You know what we could do? We could do a 2 by 3 layout. Because these would be your top row. These would be your, or no, these would be your middle row, and then these would be your bottom row. And it ends with the parts go flying. That works because it kind of sets up Country Cat as a disruptor a little bit, you know. Even though he's invited back or whatever, he creaks and it, you know, his apprehension is like kind of informing the situation rather than if he were to just you know, I guess if just walk in like a normal person or normal anthropomorphic cat. All right, so let's now that we've got the pacing figured out, and we can, let's draw like kind of a facsimile of our page here. And if I'm using that wording correctly, I'm not sorry. Let's see here. All right, so we got the ding. I like the way I've drawn that here, so we'll keep that. We got our bell kind of swinging as it hits the door frame, or not the door frame, but hits the door. The door hits it. I want it to be swinging, so we're going to kind of draw the action lines here. So the pencils will look a little bit unclear. That's all right. We're going to go back in with the pen and we'll find the correct lines. All right, so there's that one. There's our pencils for that. So that's the thing. When you're doing storyboards, you want them to be quick. You want to be clear, but you want to be quick. You don't want to be, you want to think about it, but you also want to not think about it too much. It's this weird in between with, I mean, I think that's with like any type of drawing, though, to be honest with you. Any sort of good drawing I've gotten has been only because of that. All right, so China Cat stands inside. I like him. Maybe we'll have him hat in hand rather than closing the door. I like the image of him holding his hat in his hand because that says a little bit more about his apprehension here. Okay, so this is narrative drawing. It's like he could just be standing there in a T pose or with his arms to his side or with his, maybe scratching his head. Like, but some of these, especially the head scratch, I try to avoid that one because I feel like that's kind of like the default move you see in a lot of, narrative illustration. There's nothing wrong with it. It's just like, that seems like a lot of first ideas, including mine. So I always try to come up with like a few and, hat. See, I drew the hat in hand, then I drew the hat on his head too. I try to come up with a couple or whatever to try to illustrate. And that's where I think it's helpful when you're doing your free writing and you're outlining and stuff like that. If you're very descriptive, just don't try to edit yourself. The more words you have in your outline, the better, the more you have to work with. Some of it becomes, maybe it becomes to the point of unclarity, but you should use your judgment a little bit, but don't be overly judgy. So we got him in front of the door, and then maybe some shelves like right here. It's a little overwhelming a little bit. Oh, those feet are too big. And then I like to have a checkered floor. I gave his kitchen a checkered floor, and I think that works well with him going from inside to outside in the sunlight and stuff like that. So like black and white kind of stuff. Just to kind of, again, narrative drawing, visual storytelling. These are the things you want to kind of think of. Here's a window over here that was in the front of the shop. So it gives this a little bit more depth. Maybe we want this shelf to be a little bit farther ahead. Maybe another shelf over here. But we want him to feel trapped and surrounded on all sides too. So that's why you put him dead center and use like the 1 point perspective, because it kind of feels like everything's squishing in on him. That's my idea anyway. Okay, so panel 3. China Cat peeks around a corner of a shelf. So we kind of already have that here. Ooh, maybe we can cut the box off a little early and use, like the panel box a little early and use that as like the shelf he's peeking around and like have his ears. That's a little bit too extreme of a lean, I think. He's got 2 legs, so we got to think of it as like a counterweight. You got this one's extending, but this one's got to support the weight, which will mean his shoulder's down a little bit here. The shoulder is free to go up with that elbow, and then we can kind of have the head be like that. So he's like kind of peeking around the corner. We can make his tail going a little curious here. I don't know if that's obvious what's going on, but I do kind of like that drawing. So you know what? I have this one here. I'll have this option here. So when I go to the big paper, I can think about it then. It's good to have more than one option. That's the other thing that you got to realize if you're making any sort of art or comic books or anything, you're going to be repeating yourself an awful lot. And it's always good, especially with drawing. You get better at these things, I think, the more you put them down and come back to them with like earnest, honest effort. I kind of like that. That's interesting. There might be something to that I can work out. All right, so panel 4. A man is sitting behind the counter right here. And then we can kind of echo this because right here I have his ears kind of being the bottom of this panel here. I'll put the words here. And the man is deep in concentration. I think the tail of that balloon's too big. So you have that, you got him working there, you got like that counter there, that counter there, and that counter there. We can kind of do some like, we'll figure some sort of texture out for that. Oh, I'm sitting on a chair too, actually. So yeah, this could get a little complicated. I might be doing a little much with this one, but that's okay. I have it communicated pretty well here, I think. So I think between the two of these, I could figure it out. So again, you don't want to linger too much on this stuff, but you don't want to get too lazy. I think once we get some ink on this too, it'll also change or inform, maybe not change, but inform, give us more information to work with as far as like how the drawing is working. But I think as far as like the shape of the panel, which is kind of what we're looking for when you're thumbnailing, is you want your compositions, your shapes of things to be satisfying, and you're looking for how they can flow together, where the action is going. I think we're pretty good so far. All right, so China Cat takes a step out of the aisle. So I think this will be one of those classic cartoon kind of shots where it's like the foot's going, doing the tiptoe thing. And then the other thing that's useful about making the floor a checkered floor is when you do close-up shots like this, it's a good shorthand for telling your audience that, hey, we're looking at the floor, you know, without having to draw, a bunch of floorboards or something. And then we can do like our shelf in the background. And then it's going to say, creek. That's AK? Yeah. EK is the water. Let's see. The man with his back turned winces as parts go flying in all directions. I do like the pacing of this a lot. Because this is like, so far in the story, we've set China Cat up as like running into problem after problem after problem, trying to find solutions for things. And this is another kind of like, uh-oh, here's another problem, but now he's not at his house and not in his yard. And, he's taken himself this far from home to encounter yet another problem. He's interrupted this man's work. And so we'll get a closer shot of the man that doesn't have China Cat framed by it. And then like springs and like gears go flying in all directions. Oh, Country Cat, you've done it this time. All right, so now I like to get some ink on these. Makes the drawing a little bit more clear. When you do yours, you might like to leave yours in pencil, which is great too. But I just know that if I don't put ink on it, where's my pen here? Here it is. Using the old Twisby here. And obviously we'll draw better on the big paper. But as far as communicating what's happening, I think this will be perfectly fine. But it's good to also try to be moving fast too. Obviously accuracy is good and you want to try to be accurate, but looseness, I think, is something that, it just comes with practice. But if you're fast, you're loose, when you draw fast, you're training yourself to, you're training those muscles to respond without having to think about something. You want drawing to be kind of a natural, extension of yourself. What's going on, Gizmo? I'm almost done. Okay. And then we'll just put our checkerboard pattern in here, and then we can also, indicate background here, maybe put in like a drop ceiling here, anything to make it look like space is receding. And then we can also think about if the windows are like right here, then these walls wouldn't be getting super amount of light. It doesn't matter. Anyway, it serves to, there's not really a logic in it other than it has to serve, kind of like these motifs we've kind of set up, which is the fun thing about visual storytelling is, you write the words, but then as you're drawing them, you insert these things that like, that just kind of work for you, and then you just, it's kind of a well you can keep coming back to, that you can kind of keep calling back in subtle ways. You don't want to make it like so overtly obvious, like, you know, when they teach you to like write like a thesis, like state your thesis, you know. You don't got to beat people over the head with it. But it gives you kind of a gestalt, like a visual gestalt to kind of develop and continue to draw from. Like even China Cat peeking around corners is something I've already done like a few times, you know. So it's actions, it's you know, the ways you like to frame things, it's you know, mark making and patterns, you know, whatever it is, you know. I think a lot of it has to do too with like materials you use, because if it's something you're comfortable with or something you really enjoy using, you know, you're probably gonna take more interesting risks with it. Gizmo, what are you doing, buddy? This cat is out of his mind. So some of this we can probably, I'm interested to see how I'll tackle it, because I would like it to work in black and white, but I also would like to, you know, be able to do some watercolors over some of these things. Buddy, hey, stop. You gotta relax, okay? I'll pick you up in a minute, okay, bud? You gotta relax. My ears might be doing a little bit too much, but that's all right. These are things we will figure out as we draw them more, because, you know, it's all about working out these ideas up until the very last. I mean, you want to try to have most of your ideas worked out by the time you get to the final drawing. Let's draw our letters first. Gizmo, what are you doing? I wonder if I should make this onomatopoeia going across the whole thing, like a creek. I think that would be a good idea. We'll make this go across the whole thing, and then it'll have a, you know, like a little jagged word bubble that points to the foot, and then it'll go. Turn this to an A. Turn this to an A. Turn this to an A. You got stuff flying in all directions. You can even have it breaking the panel here. What do I say? Like springs and gears and littler gears and more springs and maybe a bigger gear. And maybe one more spring. And there you have it. You know, and now that we finished down here, this should be dry up here, so I'll start erasing up here. The important thing is not to erase where you've just put down ink, otherwise you're going to smear your ink. You got to give it a minute to dry. So go ahead and start at the beginning. That is most likely to be dry. Don't be too zealous with your erasing. Take your time. I kind of like this, actually. This works pretty well, because he's in here. You establish it. Especially if, you know what we can do, we can put the, move the shelf up and we can put a little bit of the floor. I think if we communicate a little bit of the floor, that would help. there it goes. And that's going to be page 11. I always like to label that. And then I'm going to put a little note here. And then change in script to reflect. All right. And that pretty much does it. That's how I make comics, from outline to script to thumbnail, and then eventually to the big paper, so that way it can be printed and all that fun stuff that makes it fully formed. So if you like to make comics or you like to draw, I hope this has been helpful to you, or informative or inspiring or whatever. And thanks for stopping by. See you next time.